All right, welcome to the Sons of Thunder. My name is Joel Settecase, and I am I'm what you might call, let's see, if this was SpongeBob, I would be like SpongeBob, and I'm joined by my brother Squidward.
Yeah,
Introduce yourself, Squid.
that's great. From the man who is copying my mustache style currently as we speak.
Now that's a rich one. That's really rich, and let me tell you why that's rich.
I'm SpongeBob. You're the bubble guy.
You're
You
like
don't understand that reference, do
No,
you?
I don't. You're
Yeah,
like
you
a
wanted to play
squirrel.
SpongeBob games, but
You're
you
like
don't know
you're
now.
like here's the thing. First of all, first things first, you are Sandy the squirrel.
Yeah, Sandy was awesome. I like Sandy. She's from Texas.
Really?
Yeah. Come on, man. You don't know anything about
No, I don't know
SpongeBob.
anything about it. I don't know anything about it. Listen, I will also say this. Who had the mustache first? And
Me,
who
I did.
wrong.
I
That's a
had
lie.
I had a Fu Manchu.
No.
Yeah.
I had a mustache first.
No.
I grew the mustache. Yes, I did. I grew the mustache first. And it was like early
You did the
2014.
handlebar first, but I did the Fu
No,
Manchu in 2013 when I started my year of singleness.
no,
Fu Manchu, and I had a fro mullet.
Yeah, well, that was nice, but I did have a mustache before you did. You did not have the Fu Manchu.
That's not
first.
true. That's
Yes,
not
it
true.
is.
But let's
Totally
continue
true.
on here. So I have a new mic here. This is awesome. Got some headphones going in, and I can really tell we're the Sons of Thunder because your voice is booming in my ears right now.
Yeah,
Absolutely blasting.
that's exactly how it should be. I'm still working on a way where I can just have my voice in your ear constantly.
Yeah, that's good.
Parker,
That would be awful.
don't do it.
So
Now
much
do it.
unbearable. That was my whole
Uh,
childhood, actually. So
You'd be a lot more wise
Yeah.
to heed the
what
voice.
do we got going on?
All right. So today we are talking about a topic which we've sort of broached before. We've sort of skimmed the surface like a stone skipping over the surface of
Of surface.
of some sort of surface.
Yeah.
And that is the subject of Jordan B. Peterson. And so today we are going to talk about this man right here. And but not this book. We're talking about his 12 rules for life. You can see that in the camera there. And the reason why we're talking about Jordan Peterson's 12 rules for life is because, first of all, he's very influential, and I would even say rightly so. I think he's having a big impact on the church, on young men. I think he's having a big impact on a lot of our own listenership, Park. I think if you go back and if I can actually analyze. Spotify gives us the stats on who's listening to our podcast.
Yeah.
And it's like the vast majority, and this is increasing all the time, is 18 to 27, but really even in that, like those early 20s, there's a big coalition of guys who are listening. And those are the guys that are listening to Jordan Peterson. And these aren't the guys donning Antifa masks and running out in the street screeching. These are the guys who are trying to get their lives together. And so they're being influenced by Peterson. And so I think we decided, hey, Peterson's got some pretty significant thoughts here. Maybe we ought to, analyze them. Why do you want to talk about him?
Yeah. Well, so we're a little bit late to the game. This book came out in 2018, and I read it really quick and put out a book review because I wanted to be one of the first, and now it's like we're a couple of years late here. But Peterson is still influencing culture. He's still got a lot of really good things to say. And last semester here at TEDS, I wrote a research paper on his maps of meaning. And so what Peterson has even said, maps of meaning is like the precondition of 12 rules for life. It's built up on all the work that the careful work he's done in maps of meaning. So I thought it'd be pretty cool to integrate the two and provide our listeners with a little bit more background for Peterson's thought and introduction to him.
Is this a guy, has he personally influenced you, would you say?
Yeah, I think so, man. Well, definitely. I mean, I love the guy. In my paper on maps of meaning, I was pretty critical because I think his actual like formal theoretical psychology and philosophy and theology is not all that great. But when it comes to practical stuff, man, he's he's got a really good way of putting things. He's got a lot of sticky language, a lot of sticky analogies, and since he is kind of parasitic on a Christian view of the world, a lot of what he says coheres with the Bible.
Yeah, parasitic. Wow.
It's a fact of matter. I'm not like trying to blast him yet, but
yeah.
He considers himself broadly in a Christian framework. I would say he's definitely not.
Right.
But
we've talked about that.
Kind of a foil that he uses, or just the milieu, or whatever you want to say.
Do you think who's influenced you more, Jordan Peterson or Mark Driscoll?
Driscoll for sure.
Wow,
I love Driscoll. I'm not afraid of that. I mean, Driscoll to me is dead though. Like this new creature that's walking around with Mark Driscoll's name is not Driscoll.
Why?
He's a different man.
Why? How so?
He's a totally different guy. Totally different approach to everything. He's a different guy.
Yeah, he doesn't look right in the.
He looks different.
He doesn't. He doesn't look in the camera and scream obscenities at his congregation.
Need that. That was gold.
Yeah, it was good.
Another reason. So Jordan Peterson, people who listen to Peterson still and still appreciate his work are also the same kind of crowd who's listening to Jocko Willink. And that's a lot of the guys that I work with, a lot of wrestlers, a lot of football players who hear the same kind of messages from their coaches growing up about putting a burden on your back, about taking up some responsibility, about facing life with a stern face, like a flint, and saying, I'm gonna power through this. I'm gonna make things happen here. I'm not gonna complain. I'm not gonna whine. I'm gonna go happen to life. That's something that resonates with young men looking for direction, looking for guidance.
Rightly so.
I like that. Yeah,
rightly so. It should resonate. I mean, what's the alternative? The alternative is you're a victim.
Right.
Be soft. Be unsure about yourself and
complain the loudest, and everything will go well.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, or stand up. It's because there's a big difference between standing up for your responsibilities and standing up for your perceived rights, so to speak. Right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Well, we're gonna get into it.
There's a difference between standing up for those who don't have a voice,
right,
versus clanging your own gong. I am a victim, right? And there's a huge difference between that. The two.
Quick tangent. I was just thinking about this, and I hope this doesn't ruffle too many feathers here, but
it's gonna for sure. I'm sure whatever you're about to say.
Listen, this whole idea that that healthcare is a human right. You've heard people say that, right? Healthcare is a human right. Healthcare is you haven't heard that?
Of course I've heard that.
Come on. Healthcare is a human right. It's this idea. It's asking, okay, I've got sick family members. I understand the need for healthcare 100%. But this idea that I need other men to provide for my family, that's really what this is. I'm not man enough to handle things. I literally need it to just be provided for me. Now, I've taken a lot of help in my life, Park. That's not the issue.
Yeah.
Taking help is not the issue, but saying I am owed this by you people.
Right.
I literally I have no obligation to contribute anything.
Yeah.
You all have to provide that for me, which I think is that healthcare is a human right is kind of that. If you take that to the extreme, that's what you're saying.
Well, there's two extremes, right? Because then there's the other extreme of rugged individualism that you're not a man if you can't provide for your family, and that's not it either.
That's correct.
It's not just the individual; it's the individual family unit, right? Like mom taking care of your other kids while your other kid is in the hospital, and private donations to Lurie's children, Lurie Children's Hospital, like all those things. Yeah, of course. Yeah, it takes a village, or whatever, right? Like, sure, but that gets into positive and negative rights too, right? Like your rights end at my face.
Yeah,
right? Like, that's where it ends. And so to say healthcare is a human right means that someone else is forced to provide that right for you.
Right. And in reading this book, we're going to really get into Peterson's first rule here, but in reading this book by Ron Dart, or edited by Ron Dart, the book is Myth and Meaning in Jordan Peterson. And one of the things, one of the contributors talks about how Peterson is so unique when he talks about free speech
Yeah.
You want to talk about rights and things like that? He doesn't discuss free speech just as this bare license, don't tread on me kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's not just I can say whatever I want and you can't say boo. It's free speech, but it's freedom to not lie. It's freedom to speak the truth. And one of the rules in the book
where it's freedom to think.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You have to, because he does draw on other people. You have to be able to say things in order to think and react with people. And I'm going to say this, and I need to be able to say it. And if I can't, then I'll never know if it's right or not.
Right. So it's freedom against being coerced, but it's also, like you said, it's freedom to be able to think. And I don't know about you, man, but like I do my best thinking while I'm actually speaking. I might think I have a good idea, but then I start talking about it.
Yeah. Well, actually, I do my best thinking under coercion. At the governmental level.
So basically the government,
whatever they tell me to think, I just feel, really good about that.
Well, they probably know better. Actually, I know a guy, I don't know if he'll ever listen to this. If so, he'll know I'm talking about him. He literally told me that he thinks Bernie Sanders would be better at handling his money than maybe
he would. Maybe that guy's terrible at his money if he thinks that.
But literally it was not like
Bernie Sanders has 3 houses and he's handling his money pretty well.
That's true. That's true. But it wasn't like Bernie Sanders, if he were in my shoes, would do a better job. It was literally, if Bernie Sanders would to actually take my money, he would do better with it. And I'm just, that left me. And I don't know why I'm thinking about Bernie Sanders, but that whole healthcare for all, sorry, not healthcare for all, but healthcare is a human right that you owe me. I don't know. I kind of feel bad about what I just said about that. I might have to just go back and delete that later. But.
No, it's live, man.
Good. Well, since we're live, let's get into it. Let's talk about JBP's rule number 1: stand up straight with your shoulders back. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. So the big idea here that we want to really discuss is how biblical is this rule, and what should Christians think about stand up straight with your shoulders back, and all of the secondary ideas that Peterson presents along with that. So let's talk about, this big idea of stand up straight with your shoulders back. How does he define it? I mean, he is talking about having good posture, maintaining good posture, which Park, we were both wrestlers. You wrestled all the way into college, and you're Division I wrestler, and the importance of having the right posture, the right stance.
Right.
And so what do you make of this? What do you make of this injunction to stand up straight with your shoulders back? Is there something to this?
Yeah. So it's complicated from a Christian perspective, right? There's a lot that it does bring up for me as a man, as an American man, as a wrestler, as a Christian man, right? So I think there's definitely something to it. I'd be lying if I didn't say that since I heard him say that back in 2016 or whatever. I kind of noticed myself a little bit more about my posture. And I've noticed other people's posture too, it's really interesting if you watch people and you see the hangdog, slumped shoulders. And there's something that we do read cues. I don't know how much it affects you. So Peterson's thing is it's behavior modification. If you stand up and intentionally put your shoulders back as if you're ready to face the world in a combative, not necessarily aggressive, but saying I'm ready to face the world, then your mind will do likewise. Your serotonin levels may increase and you're acting like a triumphant lobster.
And there is a vulnerability to doing that as well. There's a vulnerability that comes with openness, because Peterson talks about being slouched over like this is the posture you would take if you were being attacked by a wild beast, because
protecting your precious organs,
your precious innards, and and keeping them, so that you're the lion or whatever is only able to claw at your back. And if you're walking around life like that, it actually invites attack. There's something subconscious that happens that where people see that and they say, oh, this is someone who's ready for an attack. I'm going to attack them.
I get confused on that. Because you'd think like that's a sign of weakness, right? Someone's slunched over. You see a dog with his tail between his legs.
Yeah, slunched over.
It's pathetic, and you don't think, this is going to attack me. This is a threat. You may kick it, or like, I'm not kicking dogs, but I shouldn't say, you
might kick it. I'm sure.
Who knows?
Obviously, you're going to kick it.
It's not a threat. It's not like if you saw a pit bull just straight up with his beast of a chest and all his forearms and stuff looking at you, you'd be like, this is more threatening. You know, what are you challenging me, you stupid dog?
But that's just it. That's just it. If you're a predator and the prey is just hunched over there, it communicates an expectation on the part of the prey. I could very easily be eaten. I am vulnerable. It's not. You think about that, the great big pit bull with the chest puffed out. That's an animal that says, I dare you to attack me. Go ahead. See what's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
And Peterson, I believe Peterson's a behavioralist, isn't he?
Yeah. I'm not sure if he would 100% say that. I think he is. Yeah. He's a pragmatist, and I think he would probably say he's a behaviorist. He said that before, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
I think he is.
Well, and that would make sense why he says, if you stand up straight with your shoulders back, it does more than just present yourself as someone who is more confident and more competent. He talks a lot about competence.
Yeah.
But it actually will begin the psychophysiomatic, I think is the word that he uses, the psychophysiomatic process of becoming more competent and more confident.
Yeah.
Listen, we should break down what he says in his actual book. And we've talked about this before, Park, but we should really just remind everybody about what the Matthew principle is and how that factors in.
Yeah.
The Matthew principle that's found in Matthew 13:12. Could you give us just a reminder about that?
Yeah, the Matthew principle, I can't find it now, is it's he who has more will be given, and he who doesn't have, even what he does have will be taken from him.
Right.
And
the little he has, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a spiral. It's a spiral up or it's a spiral down. And dude, this is a truth of reality.
Yeah, Peterson calls it brutal. He says it's a brutal statement, but he says it's true.
And I believe it. The more money you have, the more money you're able to make. The less money you have, like if you don't have a job, how hard is it to get a job? But if you have a job, it's much more easy. It's much easier to transfer jobs, to get an additional job, to get references. Think about with podcasts, man. Like how hard is it to get good guests when you're a nobody? But once you get a good guest, hey, you could tell everyone else, hey, I had this guy on last week. Oh, you had him on. And then now I've had these 5. And now you're just in. And now.
Yeah. Dude, speaking of which, I gotta tell you afterwards, after this recording, who I am going to have on. You're going to flip, man. It's really exciting.
Is it me?
Yeah, it's you. Yes, it is actually. You're gonna flip when you find out you're gonna be a guest.
That'll be wild.
On my podcast.
So the principle is also called Price's Law after Derek J. DeSola Price.
Price's Law? I've heard of the Pareto Principle. I have not heard of Price's Law. What is that?
Price's Law, same thing. The Matthew Principle.
Okay, well, the Pareto Principle, we've discussed this before. This is the 80-20 rule. This is where 20% of contributors tend to contribute 80% of the contributions.
Are you saying that right? Is it Pareto?
Maybe it's Pareto.
Pareto. I think it's something like that.
It's probably Pareto. Pareto. I've never heard it said. I've only ever read it. But it's this idea that the greatest contributors to society, the people, the vast majority of music that orchestras playing today are done by were originally composed by a minuscule percentage of all the composers out there. And even those composers who do get played, it's a small percentage of their works. And it's just so fascinating. You think of the huge library of songs that orchestras have to play from, and yet they're playing the same ones over and over and over.
Yeah.
The contributions continue to multiply.
Is it Pareto distribution? Is that?
Yeah, it might be Pareto distribution, but I've also seen Pareto Principle.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe it's the Pareto distribution principle.
Yeah, and so Peterson draws this back to Lobsters because first of all, it's genius. I thought about this and I thought it was kind of silly, but But it's genius. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone wants to talk. This dude's talking about lobsters. What?
Yeah.
And within his view of the world, his world and life view, it does make sense.
It does.
He believes that we are evolved creatures, that we evolved from a singular life form, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And along that path are lobsters, and lobsters have a similar neuro chemistry, neurobiology as we do, and such that when they lose fights, they start to shrink back down. The neurochemistry changes, and he says their brains like melt, and they're recast as a loser lobster brain.
Yeah.
And the winner gets more, and he's got more serotonin, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
And they can react to antidepressants. So if you put two lobsters together and you have them fight each other, you take the loser and you give him some serotonin, he'll go fight again and lose again.
Here's the difficulty. So you're right. He says that we diverged from lobsters 350 million years ago. And I wonder what you think about this. And I do want to unpack this more. But when he's talking about lobsters, essentially what he's saying is after a lobster loses, let's say 2-3 fights in a row, these competitions with other lobsters, maybe it gets one of its eyeball stalks cut. Maybe it gets, one of its claws injured or whatever, a vulnerable part of its underbelly is wounded. The lobster, it's like you said, its brain basically melts and it's reordered as this submissive, depressed lobster.
Yeah.
Now I know he does say that antidepressants can affect the lobster, but that's really more of a psychosomatic effect. What you don't see is a lobster learning to put its claws up and stand up straight and stretch itself out. And a lobster that's a defeatist lobster is going to continue to be a defeated lobster, and that would seem to sort of undercut Peterson's behavioralism. In other words, if we're descended from lobsters, we're just as biologically determined as they are, unless there's some sort of mechanism by which we can transcend our, biological determinism. In other words, a lobster can't come back from defeat. You would think neither can a human being, which would sort of put this whole rule, it would sort of make it impossible for us to attain. I wonder, what do you think about that?
Yeah. So he does talk about a difference between us and other animals, lesser evolved animals. He talks about in Maps of Meaning for sure. He talks about the fact that we are self-conscious, and Peterson's big into myths and the Joseph Campbell style, Carl Jung style, looking at Christianity through this lens of myth. And so what he's saying is,
who is Joseph Campbell?
What's that?
Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell. Who are they?
Yeah, Campbell, he developed the idea of the hero's journey and the hero with 1,000 faces or 10,000 faces. That there's these great archetypal myths, and he was pulling from Carl Jung, who talked about archetypes within our collective unconscious. And so there's this collective unconscious that all humans have. Like we all. It's not necessarily like a metaphysical thing, but it's weaved throughout all of our collective history. And so as we are growing, it's just inaugurated into us. Like it's in the air that we breathe as humans.
Yeah, it's a little mysterious how these because like what are the archetypes grounded in?
Dude, this is really interesting actually. So that was Peterson's whole project with Maps of Meaning. Is to ground those archetypes.
Okay, so just to really spell this out, these archetypes are these primal ideas that are embedded in humanity, and probably even, according to the evolutionary idea, even in our non-human relatives, evolutionary relatives, which neither you nor I hold to, but it's these ideas that keep springing up. This is why so many of our stories seem so similar. It's because it's the same archetypal ideas coming up. And the question is, if all we are is evolved beasts, if we're just animals and we're really just dealing, because even Peterson, when he talks about the spirit, he sort of speaks about spirit metaphorically. I want to talk about that a little bit more later. Yeah. But if all we are these psychosomatic unities, these physical beings, what are the archetypes grounded in? They can't be grounded in changeable matter if they're these unchanging ideas.
Yeah. So following the archetypes are like a beefed up version of memes, not memes that we share on Facebook, even though memes that we share on Facebook are actually like, yeah, that's what the meme theory is, which is really interesting, which I believe Richard Dawkins was a key proponent of.
I think it's in The Selfish Gene he started talking about.
Which is crazy interesting. Every time we're sharing a meme on Facebook, giving him a little tip of the hat. But Peterson doesn't like memes. He thinks that they're less intellectual archetypes, or they're knockoff archetypes. So archetypes are these deep rooted things deep within our psyche, deep within our collective unconscious. And Peterson's whole project was to say, yeah, where do these things come from? And he wrote a letter to his father early on in his career, which he includes in the end of Maps of Meaning, saying, I think I'm onto it. I think I can figure out why we have this duality of order and chaos. It's because it maps onto our neurobiology. We have this left brain and right brain, and one is more gregarious, and one is more attracted to order. And so you're living on this razor's edge of the yin and the yang, and that's representative of our mind. That's why our brain, and that's why we have all these stories that represent chaos and order and this eternal collision. And so he's rooting it all in our actual neurobiology.
And even the prince saving the princess is sort of like order rescuing chaos.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Well, and so then again, to bring it back to his appropriation of Christianity, the fall, which we would say is a moral failure, moral corruption,
in a historical event.
Peterson would say that's our way of coping with snapping into self-consciousness, to bring it all back, right? So we had consciousness, animals are conscious, but the lobster, like you were saying, he doesn't get to choose, I'm going to put my claws up and now I'm going to change my neurobiology. We can, because we're self-conscious creatures, but we had to come up with a story to figure out like what happened to us, that we can be these weird creatures who know there's something wrong with us, to be self-conscious, to see that we actually are naked and vulnerable. Yeah. So he reinterprets the Genesis story as the mind's self-awakening.
Yeah, his view of the Bible is he says the Bible was thrown up from the sort of the massive of humanity, in sort of deep evolutionary time. These ideas sort of took root, and the Bible was thrown up over thousands of years. And I misspoke there. Not that the Bible arose in prehistory, but the Bible arose as sort of a collection of books expressing. Man, he gives humanity so much credit here. That this idea that there's a cohesive story from start to finish, and that these universal truths could all be expressed in the single collection of books, just sort of arising from the human psyche and all these things.
And because of his view of JEDP, the JEDP model.
Right.
And which it's been redacted, it's been added to. It's like a Wikipedia page, and so it can be trusted because it's had thousands of years of collected editing from these truths that come from here, but also do play out in history, such that history can be mapped by studying neurobiology.
Yeah, the JEDP theory of the Bible is that the Bible was not actually, the Torah was not actually written by Moses, for example. It was written by several different sources. There's the priestly sources, the Yahwistic sources, and essentially the Bible is really a collection, like you said, a Wikipedia page. And we all kind of contributed to it, or many different people contributed to it. And it takes a pretty big leap of incredulity I should say credulity to read the Bible and see how cohesive it is and go, oh yeah, sure, I think a community came up with this, as opposed to the divine author who actually is controlling and inspiring the words that he wants. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, totally.
And but if you're Peterson, he really holds, and I want to talk about this later, but he really holds scripture at such an arm's length. He holds it reverently, but he does so at such a safe distance that it can't actually impact him. Not in the way that you and I have been impacted by scripture. We got to get into that more.
Well, it's super weird because it's like a weird idolatrous view of scripture, which is super weird to think about, right? Because you think you can't idolize the scripture, but like if you really, really love Dostoevsky and you had a special copy in your house and you didn't even let people touch it, and you would read it and he's the best writer ever. This really, really expresses the human condition. Wow. And you're reading that instead of doing your homework, instead of taking care of your kids. Like, you don't believe that the story of the brothers Karamazov, You don't believe that it's actual history, but it so tells of the human condition. It's so weird. He's like putting the Bible on this pedestal.
But it's the wrong pedestal.
Right.
It's like in putting the Bible on this pedestal, he's actually putting humanity on a pedestal rather than God. He's putting humanity on a pedestal, saying, look what man has created, as opposed to saying, look what God has given us.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And so he's actually denying. It's this ironic thing, because it seems like he's giving dignity to humanity, but what he's really saying is, look what these evolved, self-aware beasts created, that doesn't necessarily have any grounding in objective metaphysical truth per se.
Yeah.
It's really just this self-reflective collection of documents. It speaks about us. It's from us. It's through us.
And he does have a place for revelation, at least in Maps of Meaning. But revelation is not inspiration that we believe the Holy Spirit carried authors along to write. A sovereign God had them write exactly what he would have them write. But it's more like, I've had a revelation, right? I've been studying, and I finally got that idea for my paper. And it was a spark of inspiration. It was a spark of revelation. Wow, I got it, right? That's Petersonian revelation. So while he would say, yeah, I still have a place for revelation, it is, like you said, it's humanistic. It comes out of our collective unconscious.
All right, so let's get back to lobsters here. So so Peterson's idea is that because we descend from the lobster and we see the physical representation, sort of how each lobster, as Peterson puts it, he says, each lobster carries with it a tally of its wins and losses. And you can see this in its posture. And that's related to its, biochemistry. It's psychophysiological chemistry.
Yeah.
More serotonin equals more confidence equals better body language. Okay. But he says, because we come from the lobster, that we should expect to see similar behaviorally, similar chemically affected behaviors in ourselves, and behaviorally, experientially impacted chemical balances in our bodies. I think, he also talks about hierarchy as well, which we haven't really talked about.
Yeah, that was what I was going to bring up next.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that. Let's talk about what he says about hierarchy. And then, Park, let's really try to relate this to scripture and find out. And I've got a few verses here.
Yeah.
And I want us to really sort of unpack, is what he's saying in accordance with scripture? Is it in accordance with what the Bible says about mankind, about the world we live in, as well as the individual self? So what does he say about hierarchies? Let's unpack.
So he says that dominance hierarchies have been an essentially permanent feature of the environment to which all complex life has adopted. So there's these hierarchies of dominance that are present in the lobsters, and he traces them back to lobsters. One, because it's wild that, wow, okay, he's pointing to lobsters. But then two, from his view, lobsters are ancient, like they're before trees. They're this really simplistic neural makeup. They have this really simplistic, unevolved, neural makeup.
He loves to say that. That's older than trees.
Older than trees, man.
I love that.
So it would be really interesting if you could find these hierarchies in lobsters. Yeah, and he has. And so they've been here forever. So that means that it's something we have to deal with. It's not, he says later, it's not just a result of capitalism or communism or the patriarchy or the matriarchy or any instantiation of hierarchies. Those are instantiations, but this hierarchy of dominance that we find in the lobster, who climbs up to the top of the pile, literally, and then fights off all the other lobsters and gets all the women through the Matthew principle.
Yeah, and it's weird that a lobster is actually getting women. That's the weird.
Yeah, I know. I knew you were gonna say that. Yeah, it's like, ladies just love. They sense that that's primordial, and that thing is older than a tree, and something about that.
Right.
So, these dominance hierarchies are part of reality. It's part of life, and so we have to deal with that. And so, instead of trying to just overthrow them, work with it, right? Like climb the dominance hierarchy. Don't be unruly. And he talks about, so if you're a lobster, man, you can destroy all the other male lobsters and you can win. But he talks about somewhere along the line, it can change when you get to apes or primates, stuff like that. If you're the chief top dog, if you're the male that's on top of the dominance hierarchy and you don't work with others well, then a bunch of other ones will come along, or all the women will rise up and rip you to shreds. So at a certain point, you have to, depending on where you are in the evolutionary chain, you may have to also work with others well.
And that's, to be fair, that's not actually a moral statement. That's just purely pragmatic. Yeah, it's pragmatic. It's self-preservation. It's not, hey, it's more moral to work with other people. Right. It's, hey, if you want to survive,
right.
do this.
And his view of morality maybe will come up later in the book, but it's shifting. It's constantly shifting because he doesn't have a transcendent grounding of moral truths. Yeah. So that's a little bit about dominance hierarchies and how he ties that into the lobster ancestor theme.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see the similarities and the vast differences between his thought and like the neo-Marxist postmodern thought, which he talks a lot about how neo-Marxism and postmodernism are these sort of strange bedfellows here, but they really are working together. And so in this book, Myth and Meaning in Jordan Peterson, Hunter Baker talks about, he's one of the contributors, and he talks about how he says, because of the Marxist misunderstanding of unequal economic rewards as an act of oppression rather than as a productive system of incentivization, they disrupt the Pareto distribution. I'm going to pause here. Basically, Peterson points out that Marxists misunderstand the Pareto principle. They look at these really successful elite, the 1%, so to speak, and never mind the fact that all Americans pretty much are in the global 1%. We're like the most rich, the most successful, all this stuff. Okay. But Marxists say that that's an unfair thing. And all of their policies that they propose are about disrupting that Pareto distribution. We're going to we're going to tax the rich we're going to tax the billionaires out of existence and into oblivion. And by doing that, we're going to ensure a fairer world. But what that does is that eliminates the incentivization, the incentive of a productive society that says, if you are successful, if you are talented, if you work hard, then you will be rewarded for that. And so Baker continues, he says, disrupting the distribution of high rewards for high competence then leads to starvation, scarcity, and excessively high levels of political repression as revolutionaries attempt to hold on to power despite essentially failing in the task of governing for the good of the people. So this ties in, Park, with what you were talking about. The folks at the top, if they now these are revolutionaries. These aren't the most talented. These are really, I guess you could say that they're the most talented at riling people up and fomenting revolution, but they're not the most talented in being productive.
Yeah. And helping to rule justly, right?
Exactly. And that's going to tie in later when we talk about the biblical nature of all this. But the Pareto principle, far from being an unjust principle, although it might be brutal, is actually something that's a benefit, because we all benefit. We might not like Bill Gates' stance on vaccinations per se. I'm not saying I do or don't, but you might not. But you can be very grateful for the advancements that he made in computer technology.
Sure.
Anyway, go ahead.
Another thing is that's interesting is you may not be able to escape this hierarchy, right? So the Marxists come along and they have this revolution where everyone's supposed to be equal, and then it turns into a oligarchy, and then they're at the top. And it's just a worse system. It just doesn't function as well. It's less just or something like that. So it's like there's an episode of South Park where they go against Walmart. Walmart became this huge, massive, which is actually interesting because I think they stole that from Philip K. Dick's AutoFac, which is interesting. But then they all want to go against it and they kill Walmart and they start going to this local mom and pop shop, and then like it splits, or it switches screens. And it fast forwards to the future, and it's the same thing over again, just with different colors.
Pop shop blows up and turns into the next Walmart.
Right.
And then they have to go and burn that down.
And they do it again. Yeah. And that's kind of the understanding here. I think that Peterson's understanding of Marxism and postmodernism is interesting. He's been taken to task a lot by that, because the postmoderns, Christians always We go against them, Miguel Foucault and stuff like that. They were, and Derrida, they were against Christianity, and but they were against Marxism. Like the postmoderns were originally, they were responding to Marxism.
Well, that's why it's so weird that postmodernism and Marxism are now, like I said, they're strange bedfellows.
That's what I'm saying. Where it's a tricky thing to talk about postmodernism. Like,
postmodernism, if that means anything.
Right? Like, well, and they're not. They're hyper modern. I get it, but it's tricky. So I just want to acknowledge that Peterson's understanding of postmodernism isn't understood by everyone equally, right?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking of a quote when Jacques Derrida, who's one of the deconstructivists, sort of the founding father of deconstructionism, deconstructivism, deconstructionism. Basically, there is no objective truth, and texts contain within themselves the seeds of their own destruction and the destruction of the author. In other words, nothing really has any meaning, and there's no objective truth. One professor, after Derrida had died, he said, "Well, Jacques Derrida has died. If death can be said to mean anything, death is anyway."
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very good. I probably butchered that story. Now here's the question, man. Is what Peterson says, this idea of hierarchies, this idea of stand up straight with your shoulders back, is this true to the Bible's depiction of the world and of the self?
Yeah. So Peterson, as you said about the lobsters, how they can't escape this system of being determined by their neurobiology. I think that's true about lobsters, about squirrels, about conscious animals that aren't self-conscious. They and Peterson talks about us. He says, but standing up straight with your shoulders back is not something that is only physical, because you're not only a body, you're a spirit, so to speak, a psyche as well. So he has a distinction between spirit and psyche. Standing up physically also implies and invokes and demands standing up metaphysically. Standing up means voluntarily accepting the burden of being. Your nervous system responds in an entirely different manner when you face the demands of life voluntarily. You respond to a challenge instead of bracing for a catastrophe. You see the dragon hordes instead of shrinking in terror from the all too real fact of the dragon. You step forward to take your place in the dominance hierarchy and occupy your territory, manifesting your willingness to defend, expand, and transform it. That can all occur practically or symbolically, as a physical or as a conceptual reconstructing.
What page are you on?
Oh, that's 27 at the top.
Yeah, so, I had a quote from later on. I want to talk about the exact same page.
So he's talking about we have to have something that stands outside the causal determinacy of neurobiology and matter and motion, the laws of physics. We have to. In order for us to take his advice, we have to be able to listen to it. We have to be able to mull it over. We have to be able to say, you know what? Yeah, I'm feeling weak and I'm feeling all slouched over, but I'm going to listen to what he said. I'm going to rise up. I'm going to choose to act contrary to the way that my neurobiology is causing me to feel, such that I can interact. So he has a form of, in the philosophy of mind, what's called interactionism. We have a mind, and it's somehow free from the physical, and our mind interacts with our body, and our body interacts with our mind. So you can choose to think about Portillo's hot dogs, and you can cause your body to salivate, or you can be really hungry, and that triggers your mind to think about Portillo's hot dogs. Two different scenarios that show we have this interactionism in our mind.
Yeah, there's a dualism between the psyche and the soma, the body. So we're psychosomatic unity.
Yeah, that whatever the heck that means, dude. Theologians,
I know you don't like that. I know.
I hate it. They love saying that, and it because they go, Descartes' an idiot. Descartes' so dumb. Obviously, we're a psychosomatic unity. And you go, what does that mean, bro? And they're like, well, we're a body and a soul. I'm like, okay, like stop hating on Descartes. You guys don't know what you're talking about.
You lost me, man. What is Descartes doesn't say we're a psychosomatic unity?
No, he does say that. People.
Yeah, he does that. He reasons his way through that.
Right. Theologians
Or
always take issue with Descartes. With Descartes, the father of modernism, and man, he just had us, we were brains on sticks in his view. Obviously, we're more integrated. We're a psychosomatic unity.
yeah.
It's like, bro, that's just a fancy way of saying body and soul.
All
Okay,
right.
we get it.
All right. So, but when Peterson talks about this is one of the most frustrating things about his thought, and it's the way that he refers to God and the Spirit. He'll get all the way there. He'll get to the door where he's going to start talking about theology, and then he stops and he calls the whole room metaphorical. So in other words, look, on page 27, here's what he says. He goes, to stand up straight with your shoulders back is to accept the terrible responsibility of life with eyes wide open. Skipping ahead, he says, it means willingly undertaking the sacrifices necessary to generate a productive and meaningful reality. It means acting to please God in the ancient language.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, okay, in the ancient language, it makes it sound as if it's this ancient, outdated idea. Or even if you want to say, yes, the ancients, they were wise even in their simplistic theistic faith, but nevertheless, even in spite of that, there was something more profound they didn't know, and they talked about God and gods, but there is a deeper truth behind that, even if we today wouldn't ascribe it to the divinity. And I want to be charitable in reading him, and maybe when he says ancient language, what he means is these are truths that have been around since ancient times. In other words, they are time tested. But it sounds, as I first read this, my thought was, dude, you're putting this again on this mythological pedestal as a way of not having to deal with the God question that is immediate. You're looking at his creation, you're reading his truth from creation, and you refuse to deal with God as a personal deity. You want to keep him in mythology and archetype. What do you think?
Well, so for him, mythology and archetype is the highest thing that you could talk about, right? So for us, we're like, bro, God is more than a myth. He's a metaphysical ontic reference for everything. And he's like, well, no, myth is the deepest form of truth. It's passed on wisdom from eons ago that it's finds its roots, or is the root of reality. It's wisdom for life. Yeah. How could anything be better than that?
It's very man-centered, though.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I believe so. And you'll notice in that quote that you brought up, he did talk about the unconscious paradise of childhood and the burden of self-consciousness. And he talks about that much more in Maps of Meaning, that self-consciousness that we were talking about. But that self-consciousness is this precondition for acting on reality, for standing up straight with your shoulders back, ready to embrace the world like your ancient forefather Lobster did. So that's another important aspect. And to make sense of it as a Christian, we are bodies and we are souls. We are rational, volitional, and affectual or emotional beings.
Now, these bodies and souls, do you think that they are united to one another?
Yeah, I'm an interactionist. I believe that absolutely. It's obvious from any kind of studies today. No, don't do it. Don't do it.
So what are we then? What would be another?
We're
psycho.
Yeah, but it's not on the same level at all.
Unity.
No, it's not on the same level. Essentially, we are souls. You could change out your hand. We talked about this with our Mariology.
Yeah, Mariology. Mm-hmm.
So Mariology, yeah. So
Mariolatry.
I hope someone comments on the way that you say ancient instead of ancient. I really hope someone's got to say something.
Ancient.
Yeah. So
ANCKSHINT. Ancient.
So, dude. So, 2 points while we wrap up here. So, a Christian can make sense of following Peterson's advice, because we believe that, the laws of physics absolutely do affect us. We are interactionists. We believe that our body and our soul interact together, like Iron Man being Tony Stark and the metal suit, for sure. The suit breaks, he can't shoot out of his hands. Iron Man can't shoot. That's us. Okay. But you have to have some capacity to transcend your biology. Otherwise, I can't listen to him. I'm just predetermined by my biology, and even to read his book was predetermined, right? So there's no getting around that. So he affirms that, but I don't think the rest of his philosophy, psychology, or theology actually does allow a place for him to have a transcendent self that can transcend the laws of physics.
Right. No more than a lobster does. I mean, even his idea that the creation and fall story is mankind's way of explaining our own self-consciousness.
Yeah.
That still doesn't actually explain anything. It just explains where the story came from.
No, there's no ontology there, right?
There's no ontology. So
what are we? Yeah.
So what he's done is he's sort of substituting this. He's substituting a description of the purpose of a myth for an actual origin story.
Yeah.
And
he doesn't have an origin story. That's
no,
right.
and behind everything, really, if you really break down what Peterson is saying, well, what is a man? A man really is no different than a lobster. I mean, a man can't be, unless you want to say, well, a man's different than a lobster, but we just don't know why.
No,
how.
he would say it's because we're self-conscious, because we're more
Right,
advanced.
But that self-consciousness is nothing more than just, more complex thoughts in a more complex lobster. I mean, really,
he says it's a huge deal, the fact that we moved from consciousness to self-consciousness. I agree, man. I don't think that he has any room in his ontology for a self-conscious mind. He said a soul, or he said a spirit and a psyche. I don't think he has room for that. I don't think his neo-Darwinism allows for that at all, or his pragmatism. Yeah. I love the guy, but I don't think it's rich enough. And I think he is on borrowed capital. He's stealing from the Christian worldview, but I don't think that actually he's able to incorporate it into his system. And I think it really does mess up all the gears. If you're not thinking about it critically, then it sounds awesome. You just read through it and you're like, yeah, dude, I totally. But if you go, wait a second, how does that fit with the evolutionary theory you've strung together with us and lobsters? I don't think it holds together very well.
It's a lot better than a lot of the self-help stuff out there. It's a lot better. I mean, I think
it's a self-help book, man. He said that. That's so interesting. Yeah.
Well, and it's better than Joel Osteen, who's purportedly a Christian, writing from a supposedly Christian idea, but his
gumdrop like cotton candy, right? You go to bite it and it all disappears on you.
Yeah, that's right. And Peterson, at least you could follow his advice, and actually, this actually kind of makes a little sense.
Yeah.
With Osteen, I mean, you follow his advice, you end up with a life of disappointment.
Yeah.
You just say, I am this, I am that, I am this, I am that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to speak things into existence, and nothing is coming into existence.
Yeah.
Whereas with Peterson,
we talked about how does a Christian respond to this, right? So
and I want to share some scripture on this.
Well,
what do you have?
Well, the self-consciousness thing is huge, because we are image bearers of God. We do transcend the natural order. We are his image bearers. We are here to represent him as rational, volitional, moral creatures. And so for us, we don't have to be bound to this hierarchy, this dominance hierarchy. We can step back from that, and we can look outside and see squirrels, just reacting to their instincts. We don't have to act and react according to instincts. We can step back from that, and we can have a different order of society. And Christianity calls us to an inverted dominance hierarchy. Hey, who's the first in the kingdom? Whoever's last. Who's going to be the chief among you? Whoever is the servant.
Does Peterson address that at all?
Yeah, I'm sure he does, but I'm not sure what to make of it. I'm not sure. Nothing like sticks out to me that says, oh yeah, he does deal with that.
Well, the interesting thing, Doug Wilson talks about this. What Doug Wilson says about servant leadership is really fascinating, man. He talks about how, and I don't know if this is Wilson or somebody else, but when Jesus washed his disciples' feet on Maundy Thursday, he, which by the way, Maundy, I didn't realize this, Maundy comes from mandatum, which is Latin for mandate or command. And when Jesus washed the disciples' feet, he gave them the mandate to wash others' feet. That's where we get Maundy Thursday from.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, but when Jesus did that, and he was washing their feet as though he were a slave, he humbled himself down to the point of a slave. There was still no question in that room as to who was at the head of the dominance hierarchy there. Right. Jesus was still Lord. And and that's what made it so astonishing that he was doing that. So
And in so many levels, dude, right? Like he's their rabbi.
Yeah.
Rabbi, what? That's inappropriate in an honor shame culture for the rabbi to wash the students' feet. And then, yeah, he is Christ, the Messiah, and he is Lord God, Yahweh,
Right.
like the second person of the Trinity, right? So
Right.
there's like this three-tiered, I don't know how many tiers, probably a ton of tiers, right? But he is
Probably 3.
the preeminent one washing the feet of a creature of dust.
Yes. And so, what this tells us is, from a biblical perspective, I don't think, well, and I'm going to say this, I think hierarchy is very biblical. And there was a prominent Southern Baptist preacher recently, and I won't mention his name, who a couple of years ago tweeted about how he was stepping into a new position, and he was saying how he was really looking forward to dismantling all hierarchies, taking down all hierarchies. And he was raked over the coals. I don't know that he ever even noticed. I don't know how much attention he pays to the kind of people who would rake a statement like that over the coals, but he was raked over the coals because hierarchy is biblical. And Doug Wilson talks about this. Jordan Peterson, who's not a Christian, talks about this. But think about it. Let me give you a couple of examples of hierarchy. All right. So, now I can't find it, but think about the 3 forms of government that God has instituted in the world. There is the church, there's the family, and there's the state. And so, let's see. Now I'm thinking of, let's see. Oh, here we go. Okay. So in the family, think about the hierarchy in the family. The husband is the head of the wife. The man is the head of the woman in the family.
Yeah.
Okay. Which of course comes with the need to radically self-sacrifice.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
The leader is the one who's called to die.
That's correct. Yes. Just like Christ. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a self-sacrificial leadership, but nevertheless, it's a hierarchy. The wife is called to submit to the husband. The husband is not called to submit to the wife. Whatever you may want to do with that first passage when Paul says,
submit to not called to die for her husband.
The wife is not called to die for her husband. That's right.
Right.
And let me just put a quick comment up here from Larry. He says, "Hey, gentlemen, the stash power is strong with you too. Thank you, brother. We're waiting for you to join us.
That's
we're
right.
Waiting for you to join us. In the family, parents are over children. Colossians 3:20 and other passages that talk about children needing to submit to parents. Fathers bringing up their children in the teaching and admonition of the Lord. Within the household, there would also, now this is in ancient times, there would be servants and slaves. I know I had to go there.
Ancient.
In ancient, what?
Ancient.
Ancient. In ancient times.
Not anxious bench. It's
not ancient bench at all. It's not anything. That's decisionism.
Real quick here. So what you're getting at in these examples, we're talking about hierarchies. Notice we're not talking about dominance hierarchies though, right? Like that's an interesting point that I was just realizing.
Yeah. Go.
The husband doesn't dominate the wife.
Doesn't domineer over the wife.
Yeah, he's not dominating her.
I would say domineer is a better word for when that goes
the same
wrong.
root, anyways. But so
it is the same root.
But it's not.
But the root of that is dominance, which means Lord.
It's not a. Okay, sure. But it's in our context, in the way that word is used today in our society.
Yeah.
It's not this overbearing slavery situation, right?
Correct.
And it goes all the way up to God. Like God dominates, right? God is Lord.
He's Lord. He literally dominates.
And whatever he says goes, but he also doesn't, he's not this harsh ruler, right? Jesus is described as not quenching a smoldering ash or
not breaking a bruised reed.
Right. Yeah. That's the kind of servant leadership. That's the kind of hierarchy that's a godly Christian hierarchy.
Okay, but really quick, let's talk about, I hope I don't create a fallacy here, an exegetical fallacy, but the word dominate literally means to lord, not to lord it over. I think that's domineering. Okay. But to act in the function of Lord. What is
AD, right? Like something. It means
Anno Domini, which means year of our
right?
Lord. Exactly. So the word dominate means to function as Lord. Well, Lord, in modern English, we use the word Lord. Really, we don't have lords of, like, we have landlords. Okay. but we don't use Lord in the way that it's been used throughout history. We
That'd be
use
such a
Lord.
terrible and out like think of your landlord, right? And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
how we. That would be,
right. That's how God is.
yeah, their conception of God off their landlord.
Yeah. But so we use Lord really only to refer to the Lord, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. But the word Lord really, it could mean master, or it could mean like sire or sir, really. In fact, dad loves to be very unique. He calls God sir when he prays. He's like, sir this. And
That's a Latin thing, actually. Senor. They'll say God, senor.
Oh, Latin meaning like a Latino.
Yeah. Sorry.
Latinx. Latinx.
Yeah, but Pops is Latin.
He is Latinx.
But he did not get the sir from there. That's just his own
weird.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So here. Let me make a biblical connection here. Sarah was honored because she called. This is in the Bible. I didn't make this up. She called her husband Abram Lord. And people look at that and they go, "Oh, that's terrible. She shouldn't call him Lord." But Lord, that really just means sir. All it means is that she's respecting her husband. That's all that it means. So I'd want to. I completely hear what you're saying. The husband is not to lord it over his wife. Far from it. We would say that's reprehensible. That's evil for a husband to lord it over. But
I know where you're going, but
come on.
The word Lord has changed since Christ.
I know. I'm taking it back.
I'm saying you can't, because Christ has forever changed that word.
Oh no, but
we have one God and one Lord. Like
Christ is our. Oh well, okay.
So,
sure. One Lord, one faith, one baptism.
For Julie to call me Lord would be massive.
No. And I'm not saying that whatsoever.
Okay,
but what I'm saying is the position of a husband in the household is not the kind of tenuous thing that is only kept in place so long as he can influence his family, so long as he can sort of constantly win them over, and sort of like leadership. When you think about a leadership
position, it's a position.
It's a God-given position,
which means, dude, if you don't do that well, that is a huge deal.
That's right. Because you have to answer to the Lord.
You have to answer to him, but you're representing him to your family, dude.
Yes.
Imagine your kids growing up and thinking, God is like dad, and dad sucks. And it's like, dude, that's a really huge deal that you've inculcated in your children's imagination.
Okay, but in the study that I did years ago called Self-Confrontation, and actually Larry, if he's still watching, Larry and I did that together.
I did that with you. What?
Oh yeah, that's right. You and I did that too. That's right. That's good. Who are you?
Yeah.
That wasn't with you. That was with some punk kid.
It was me too.
It was with some punk kid.
So yeah, that's me.
Here's the point.
Wrap it up, because I got one more thing I want to talk about.
All right. Here's the point. Look, let's skip over that. It was a great point, but forget about it.
The Christian response. The Christian response.
Okay, so the Christian response is this: hierarchy is a God-given thing. Okay, so some of that, we don't have masters and slaves nowadays, thank God, but we do have employers and employees, right? That's a hierarchy. We don't have princes and emperors nowadays, but we do have presidents, governors, and police officers as a sort of an extension of that rightful God-given authority. We have to submit
and principles and deans.
That's right. But I would. Well, I guess if you subordinate yourself to them, if you join an educational institution, that's right.
Bought into that hierarchy.
Yes. Okay. But I'm talking about specifically the God-given hierarchies of family, church, and state. And what?
And deans.
What do you think? You think like
Dean Pelton from Community? You ever seen that?
No. What from?
What?
Wait. From what? From what?
Community.
Oh, the show Community.
Yeah.
No, I don't watch that pagan garbage.
It's really funny.
Yeah. And what is South Park, by the way?
Yeah.
But there are hierarchies. The difference is, biblically speaking, in the family, the husband and father is supposed to be like Christ. You don't actually see the same mandate given for like the emperor or like the president. The president is not supposed to die for his people. Do you see what I'm saying?
I don't see. Where are you getting that in scripture?
Well, it's the role of the prince is to bear the sword. In other words, to execute justice, to reward good behavior, and to punish bad behavior. But it's a very limited authority. Biblically speaking, the government's not supposed to do 99% of the things that our government does for us today.
I agree. I want to get back. Can we? So
here's what I'm getting at. Hierarchy is biblical, but it's not necessarily the way that Peterson describes it. And I
Not,
like
not dominance,
it's not a
right?
dominant hierarchy.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fine. I'm okay with
So
that.
it's like a servant leader. I love that. I know that we use that to try and like take the edges off of complementarianism, right? And we servant leader, we always go right to that immediately. But yeah, no, I think servant leadership is really good the way that we were talking about it.
What about servant rulership?
I don't know, man. I know you want to ham it up as much as you can to follow Doug Wilson and be a provocateur, but
No, I want to know what your thoughts are.
Fun. I want to talk about
Moving
the
on.
actual principle. So there's two things: dominance, hierarchy. We said not quite,
Sure.
but then standing up straight with shoulders back, like
Yeah.
that's facing the hierarchy. How Christian is that? Is that a manly thing? Like, what's the deal with that? I want to get your thoughts on this, man. So turning the other cheek, and like the warrior in the garden motif. Are you familiar with that?
Flesh it out in 30 seconds.
Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan and these kind of guys will talk about being a warrior in the garden. Like, it's better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in war. It's being able to do harm to someone, but having restraint. Because Peter, this is something I learned from Peterson and I really, really like. Dude, being a weakling is not noble. It's not a good thing to be this scrawny little dude who can't protect yourself or your family. What is actually admirable is someone who is strong and capable and competent and able to do harm, but doesn't, but radically controls themselves.
That is gentleness. That is meekness. And according to Jesus, the meek shall inherit the earth. It's not the weak. It's not the weak.
And that's what I wanted to bring up too. Like the meekness. I always thought, it's like this scrawny dude. I always get this scrawny dude in my mind. That's this like this meek, like shrunked up, like lobster guy who just lost fights, right? But this, I'm not sure how biblical this is, man. But what Peterson even talked about meekness and saying it's being able to turn the other cheek is strength. It's saying like, I'm just going to eat that insult. It's not like I can't fight back. And so, oh, look at that guy. Like, he can't even do anything. It's like, that's the bigger guy. And he was slapped by the littler guy. And instead of destroying him and showing his dominance and asserting, climbing the ladder of hierarchy, he turned his other cheek and said, he just put his hand behind his back and did not react. It wasn't like someone pulled a gun and he didn't defend his family or anything. It was, he turned his other cheek when insulted.
You don't have to be commanded to lose a fight. You just lose it because you're weak.
Right.
You don't have to be commanded to get beat up. You do have to be commanded to turn the other cheek, to be meek and to be gentle, because that implies restraint. Really, really quickly, Larry asked the question, what about young boys formerly being addressed as master or old English lords and ladies? They are, he says that they aren't hierarchical terms. In a sense, they actually are, because lords and ladies, that is literally a term of nobility, which is indicated a higher social position. And the young
would say master, right? Like you wouldn't Master Wayne, right? Like
Master Wayne. That's right. Well, I still remember when I was a kid, I ordered some markers from the Trix cereal. They had these fruit scented markers, and they were addressed, when I finally got them, like after 6 weeks, which is how long packages used to take in those days. They were addressed to Master Joel Settecase. And what I've now learned as an adult is you address a child as master, and when you become a man, it's Mr. So that's just sort of this. That's like this. It's like the young master. Like someday you will become a master. But over time that just got corrupted. I probably wouldn't read too much into it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But
turning the other cheek kind of stuff.
It's
like,
right.
Well,
so
Christ is the ultimate example of that, right? Like
absolutely.
Like on the cross, this is someone who was truly God and truly man and could have destroyed the whole universe at that time. If he would have like sneezed or had any kind of weakness of will in that moment, like, oh no, just kill them. Like everyone would have died. Like it took an enormous amount of restraint. And so we always have this weak Jesus up on the cross. And have you ever seen the jacked Jesus at all? There's a statue of Jack Jesus. There's a painting of Jack Jesus. And I think it's a Filipino statue. That's the jacked one. It's Pacific Island, somewhere like that, I think.
I don't know.
And it's like, haha, look at Jack Jesus, But what they were showing, I think I read up on this, was they're showing the spiritual strength of Christ in that moment to conquer sin and death, to have restraint, to be, tortured unto death, to give up his soul. Like crazy, it's it's the warrior in the garden, not the gardener in war. I love that.
Think about Matthew 26:53 gets really at what you were saying, Park. Jesus says this, or do you think I cannot call on my Father and he will provide me here and now with more than 12 legions of angels? Jesus himself is, according to scripture, the one in whom all things hold together, right? But Jesus isn't even appealing to his utter authority as a creator. He's speaking about his ability. Talk about a hierarchy. He's not talking about his raw power. Don't you know I could snap my fingers and everybody could turn to dust like Thanos? Yeah. Instead, he's saying, I have this kind of relationship with God. There is none higher than me. I am at the top of the spiritual food chain. And if I snap my fingers, if I call on my Father, he will send me at my request 12,000 angels, or whatever a legion was, 1,000 or multiple thousands of angels. And they will just wipe you out. So I could appeal to my position as the top of this hierarchy, but I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And in that part, we look at that and we say that is what true meekness is. Yeah. It's not weakness. It is meekness. It's like a bulldozer.
And that's strength. It takes enormous amount of strength to have the power to act and not to act in your own benefit and your own protection.
Because it's restraint.
Exactly. Restraint is so hard, dude. It's so hard.
Well, it's like that proverb that says, it's better to control your own emotions than to take a city.
Yeah.
It's better to keep your own self in check than it takes more control to do that than to overpower a city of a million people or whatever.
Right. Yeah. James talks about the power of the tongue there too. So one thing to finish with, I talk with my guys about this all the time, and this is something I think should be appropriated from Peterson, man. The warrior in the garden kind of language, the turn the other cheek, those kind of things. I think a Christian hierarchy is not a dominance hierarchy. It is that inverted hierarchy of the first shall be last, that servant leadership role. And I think there's also something C.S. Lewis talks about, the necessity of chivalry. And if you guys are listening right now, just YouTube that. There's an awesome C.S. Lewis doodle about it, where this guy doodles out the speech. It's amazing. It's so good.
Hey, real quick.
Yeah.
I'm worried that we're going to communicate something a little confusing. So at one point, Jesus says, many who are first shall be last and the last first. What that's conveying is, in this life, there are many people who are downtrodden, who in the next life will be first in the kingdom, so to speak. Think about a guy like John the Baptist, who,
8 locusts and honey.
Right. And then Jesus said, that there's, of men born among women, there's not been anybody greater than John the Baptist, but the least and the greatest of heaven is greater than him. So there are going to be people in the kingdom of heaven. There's going to be hierarchy even in the kingdom of heaven. I dare say.
Totally.
But there's another point where Jesus says, and this is when he's washing the feet, he says, and I don't think those are both from the same passage, I could be wrong, but he says, whoever would want to become the greatest among you must become the least and the servant of all. That's actually a different, that's a different kind of command. The first one is indicative. The first shall be last, the last shall be first. In this one, it's if you want to be greater than position yourself as a servant of others. That's what greatness looks like. So
that's communicating the same thing. One's an indicative and one's an imperative, if he's saying, or subjunctive, or say, if you want this, it's a conditional. If you want to do this, then this.
I think that there's a subtle difference between the two meanings, but that's fine.
Okay. So either way, Christ showing him washing the feet of his own followers. That's the inverted hierarchy that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But so that this idea that I want to talk about with Lewis is the necessity of chivalry, that the ancient, they're maybe not ancient, but the medieval view of a chivalrous knight is someone who would fight in hand-to-hand combat with swords and who Lewis says was accustomed to seeing smashed faces. Like, how horrific. He's accustomed to seeing smashed faces. But then when he comes home in 5 days or whatever, he can go to a ball and be almost dainty. Like, he's so meek that you would not expect him to do anything because he's gentle with the ladies. He's, like dancing around. You see like a father with his daughter. You know?
Yeah. He's gentle with the ladies. That's good.
It's something that we need to like recapture. This idea of meekness, of not just being cool, being weak, but like make yourself strong, man. I stand up straight with your shoulders back, but not in a combative, I'm going to be a douche and push everyone out of the way, but I'm ready for action. And most importantly, that's to put myself behind someone else, to put others in front of me.
I wouldn't say put myself behind someone else I guess you're speaking in terms of prioritizing. But not in terms of, I mean, we should be on the front lines in terms of facing the enemy. That's what a father,
for sure. We do that. Yeah. We lay down our lives for lives for other people. Totally. But that also means intellectually, bro. C.S. Lewis also talks about learning in wartime. If we were to leave our brothers and sisters who aren't intellectual, if we were to leave them without teaching that we're doing and stuff like that, like that's preposterous. We also have to study and learn and help out the body. I love that idea, and I do find a lot of that in Peterson, and I do think that does match up with reality. I just think that his foundation is not firm.
Yeah, I'm with you, and just one final thought on this. Really, the posture that matters even more than our posture, this is biblically speaking, more than our posture towards other people is our posture towards God.
Yeah.
So if you think the right attitude towards God, when you realize how great and holy he is and how weak and sinful we are, the right posture is falling on our face.
Yeah.
We must not exalt ourselves before God. However, in Ezekiel chapter 2, verse 1, God comes down and speaks to Ezekiel, who is just floored and awed by the grandeur of God. And God says, "Son of man, stand on your feet and I will speak with you." God actually invites us to stand up straight with our shoulders back in front of him. It's this amazingly gracious invitation to actually talk to God face to face, to actually, and when you recognize we ought to cower before God because of our sin, but God covers over our sin. That's what the blood of Jesus is all about. He covers over our sin. He nails the record of our debt to the cross so that we can come boldly before the throne of God, as Hebrews says, and it says elsewhere. And now we can actually present ourselves to God as one approved, according to 2 Timothy 2:15. Jesus says we can take heart because he has overcome the world. So our confidence, both before God and in facing outwardly, horizontally, come not from our own ability to stand up straight with our shoulders back before men, but rather knowing that God has cleared away any obstacle that we might have had between himself and us. And therefore, if we're right with God, we don't need to fear any man. There's literally there's no reason for cowardice, because we shouldn't fear man. We should fear the one who can kill body and throw body and soul into hell, according to Jesus. So there's really no room for cowardice, but it's rooted. And this is what I wish Peterson would recognize. Of course, he's not a Christian, but I wish he would recognize that confidence, that the confidence that he wants to see young men have can only be attained let me say this, it can't reach its deepest level, and it can't reach its level of maximal authenticity, if you can even say it gets past superficiality, apart from Christ.
Amen.
You have to know Jesus to have that kind of bravery and courage towards the world.
But that's exactly what we see in the Apostle Paul, right? To live as Christ, to die as gain. Matt Chandler talks about that beautifully. Like, I don't care what you're going to say about me. The only opinion I care about, I'm good with him. Like, because of Christ, I can stand up and have confidence. And dude, talk about Matthew principle, like that spirals around up and up and up. You're not like running around trying to get people to like you, and like you don't care. It's not that you're like flippant about it, but hey, I want to be winsome. As far as it depends on me, I'll live at peace with all people. But hey, man, if I can't please this guy at the end of the day, like it's not about that. He's not God, and I'm right with the Lord. Like, this is awesome. That I love that. I love the way you put that, man. That's a really, really good point. We talk about this in Athletes in Action, that God is our audience of one. That's what we do. His opinion matters. Yeah.
Amen. All right, man, we got to wrap up.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, this was good. This was good. I hope I'm gonna. My wife's probably gonna watch this later, so I hope everything that I said about. I just want to make it clear. I want to lay down my life for my wife. I love my wife. I would never want to domineer over my wife.
Yeah.
So just hopefully
the fact that you're apologizing shows that you aren't. So
the fact
that you're visible trembling is showing that
people are going to listen to this and they're going to think I'm actually trembling
visibly.
In fact, my shoulders could not be further back right now. I could not be sitting up straighter.
All right. Well, we hope that it raised your serotonin levels.
Yeah, great. Before we do that, listen, if you're watching this on YouTube, we've got a ton of other videos. What you want to do is go and watch the other video that Parker and I did. It's been one of our most popular episodes. It's called "What Should Bible-Believing Christians Think About Jordan Peterson?" Watch that, and that'll be a good introduction to our discussion about Jordan Peterson. We also did one where we talk about what makes the self persist over time. The thumbnail of it says, "What makes you you?" Check that out, because we also talk about Jordan Peterson in that as well. And there's a lot of philosophy in that is going to, I think, dovetail well with what we talked about today. If you're watching this on Facebook, drop what you're doing right now. Like the Think Institute, and go ahead and share this video, because other people need to see this. I think this is an important conversation, especially young men need to see these kind of conversations. Young Christian men need to know, how do they navigate the thought of Jordan Peterson in a way that doesn't just write him off, and also in a way that doesn't just, sort of end up worshiping his thought as if it's, he's the second coming of the Apostle Paul or something like that. Right. So Parker, what's your website?
ParkerSettecase.com. And next time on the Sons of Thunder, we're going to talk Rule 2. Treat yourself like someone you're responsible for helping.
Yes. Well, yeah, I guess that's about all we have for you. So until next time, hope it clipped your opponent's eyeball stalk.
We didn't talk enough about lobsters.
All right.
That's horrible. All right. Well, I hope it helps you.
Our opponent is Satan.
That's good. Figure out your dominance hierarchy. Sort yourself out,
bucko.
Yeah. All right.